Hello, I'm just doing the first live code with Rm2kdev. Now, I received a comment on my YouTube channel regarding loading objects at runtime for games. So this video is going to be about dynamically instantiating objects, in the context of game development, of course. So let's just get started real quick. So the first thing we need to do is have your project of Visual Studio open, ready to go. If you're using XNA, that's fine, just as long as it's a .NET 4 project, because we're going to be using the JavaScript serialization library, which is part of the system.web namespace, and I'm not sure if it's in 3.5 or 3, so I'm just using .NET 4, and so let's go. So the first thing we need to do is we just need to make sure our project's not using the compact version of .NET. We can do that by going to the project. We go to the properties of the project, and then we go to the advanced compile options. In here you'll see it's using the client profile. Now if we switch that to the full version of .NET 4, we have to save the project first, sorry. Make sure the project is saved. Just going to call that dynamic object loading. Okay, so now we switch it to .NET 4 and press OK. What this does is it just changes the version of .NET that we're using. The client profile doesn't have some of the namespaces that we're going to use, so we just do that. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a reference to, I believe it's system.web.extensions, and this gives us access to the scripting and the JSON serialization. So now we have that, let's create the first part of code. So we're going to import system.web.script.serialization. And all this does is this gives us access to the JSON serialization functions. So let's create a temporary variable. I'm just going to call it JSSer for JSON serialization, and that's going to be a new type of JavaScript serializer. So in the context of game development, let's pretend we're working with items. So I'm going to have a class in my project. It's going to be called item. Now an item is going to have a name, so let's add a property for that. Let's just call that property name, and it's going to be of type string. Now let's add another property, and we're going to call it, let's call this one description, and we'll add a final property, and we'll just call this item status effect. In case you're wondering, in order to automatically create properties, if you type prop and then press tab twice, it creates you a template. So we're just going to call this one status effect. Okay, let's just save this class. Now, typically in game development, what some people do is they tend to create an item class like this, and then they'll define everything in code. For example, sword as new item. Sword.name equals rusty sword. Sword.description equals an old sword, possibly found in a dungeon. And sword.effect, status effect, causes damage when poking things. Okay, so this is typically what people do. And this isn't really a very good way, because what you'll end up with is when you have 2 swords, you end up with this. When you have 3 swords, you end up with this. And suddenly your item database expands, and you end up with a huge text file full of information that we can't manage. So what we need to do is we need to save this to a file. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up the project. I had this project. I was creating this project before. I'm just going to open up the new one. Let's go into the folder, and we're just going to add a new folder and just call it items. This is going to be a folder where we store all of the items, and this allows us to load, edit, change things at runtime without having to recompile the application. So if we get the path to that folder, I'm just going to put these at the top just to keep it clean. Dim item database path as new string. That's just going to be equivalent to the environment. Oops. current directory and to the items folder. Now we've already got this item here, so let's template this item real quick. And by template, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this out into the JSON format. Now JSON is just a JavaScript object notation. If you do a little bit of googling on JSON, you'll find out more information about that. But we're just going to use JSON just because it's quite easy to use. So if I just call js we can serialize the object of sword. Now what this gives us, if we run this as it is, it's going to do nothing. So what we need to do is we need a way to visualize this. I'm just going to put this in a message box. Now if we run this, what you're going to see is you're going to see the properties of the object written out as text. This is called object notation. So if we save this text into a file, we can load this text later, and then we can restore the object. So that's what we're going to do. So now that we have the file, let's just call this contents of file. File contents. Sorry, object contents. As string. Now this variable is going to represent the contents of this object. So now all we need to do is save that, and we can do that easily just by making a quick call to system.io.file.write all text. Now this is just a quick way to quickly write text. It's not very, most people would use a file stream. I'm just using this to make the video short. So we just save this to the item database path, and we're going to call it sword1.txt. Its contents is going to be object contents. Now if we run this, it will do nothing, but if we have a look in the folder, what you'll see is sword1.txt. And this is the dump basically of that object. So now that we have this, let's go back to our code. We can delete basically all of this. So all we need to know now is that we're going to have a sword, and it's going to be an item. It doesn't need to be declared yet or instantiated yet, because the JSON serializer is going to bring us back the object. It's going to instantiate it with the properties that we give it, and then we'll be able to access that object. So if we say equals js_ser.deserialize, this is going to ask us for two parameters. The first parameter is what type of object are we deserializing? Well, that's an item. So the first parameter is of item. The second parameter is going to be the text that it decrypts back into an object. We don't have this yet, so I'm just going to put a stub in its place. So let's load the text of that item. Okay. So again, we can use system.io.file.read all text this time. And again, we just pass that item database path and the name of the item. We'll call it sword1.txt. And now this represents the contents of that text file. This one. And so we use that in this instance here. And basically what's happened now is this JSON deserializer has taken this contents of this file and tried to match up the entries in that file. So it's tried to match up name, description, and status effect with properties in this file, in this class, sorry. Now if we run that, nothing will happen. But what has happened is that file has been loaded. We just can't see it yet. So let's try and visualize that. Sword.name. Just add a new line. Description. And effect. Now if we run this, what we should see is rusty sword and old sword possibly found in a dungeon causes damage when poking things. Now the reason why this is dynamic is because we can easily change that file. If we come in here to this file and we call this amazing sword, and we say that this is a class 1 high-tech amazing sword of infinity, I don't know, whatever, and its status effect, let's just say it's epic. Now if we save that file and we run the program again, There we go, the sword has updated itself. Why this is useful, basically, now that we have the sword as a file, we could make another sword. We could just call this one sword 2. This one could have different properties. We could have a health potion, and again, if we go into this one, we call this one health potion, and we just give it a description. Recovers 10 HP, and status effect, it doesn't have to be text. This could be part of the scripting language of your game. So this could be add HP 10 main char, I don't know, whatever you want it to be. And all you have to do to get that into the game is change the name, health potion, just like that, and suddenly you run it, and now that object has been loaded. So this is dynamically loading an object. Let's modify this just a little bit. I'm not going to name things on here to be clean just for speed, so I'm just going to add a button. In that button's click event, let's add a button and a text box. Where's the text box? Common controls. Text box. Basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it load the name that you type into this text box. So let's copy all of this and put that into the button click event. So because we're going to be working with a generic object, may not be a sword, let's just change this to generic object and just update these references to sword to be generic object. This is because we could be dealing with a health potion, we could be dealing with a mana potion, whatever. Now all we need to do is let's just edit this line here a little bit and just add the text box in here. I think that's text box 1 by default. Text. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If we run this project now and we have a look at that items folder, just to see what they're called, let's change sword 2 to be, sorry, let's change sword 1, let's change that back to rusty sword, and we'll just for variation, we'll just call it an old sword. Status effect is going to be hurts your hands to hold, and save that. Now, in this text box, let's type in health potion and click the button. What we get is the object for health potion. Let's type in sword 1. Rusty sword, an old sword, hurts your hands to hold. Let's change that to sword 2. Amazing sword. So as you can see, this can be extremely useful for item database management or player database management, or just any database management in general for a game. Obviously you wouldn't be loading these things at runtime in a game. You would load them in the loading screen preferably for performance reasons and have them sitting in memory ready to go. You could also load them into a list of items. I won't do that, but I'll just give you a quick idea of how you would do that. You would have dim itemdb as new list of item, and then all you'd need to do is just itemdb.add, and inside of that you'd pass the item, new item, whatever item you wanted to pass in here. In this case it would be generic object, and so yeah, that is how you dynamically load objects at runtime for games. But this could be used for anything else. I've just used games as the context of this tutorial because someone on my channel had asked for it. So cool, thank you.